and welcome to another podcast. Today we're going to continue with medications and we're going to look at doxycycline. Doxycycline is a very broad and diverse antibiotic. It's used for a number of infections. It's a good choice to use it if someone's allergic to penicillins, and it's also used in conjunctions with a lot of medications just because it has that slightly different mechanism of action and there's quite good cell penetrating ability as well. So things that doxycycline can be used for, it's classic in the STI space, especially with ceftriaxone. So it's used for all STIs that involve any sort of rectal discharge. It's used with epididymitis and PID in conjunction with metronidazole. It's also used in conjunction with trimethoprim sulfamethoxone for all your seawater related wounds, which can be quite difficult to treat. It's also a very, very popular and effective drug in use for malaria prophylaxis, which we'll spend a little bit of time just discussing because it's quite pertinent to any defense listeners. So malaria is one of those very unique infections. It basically requires two hosts in order to go through its life cycle, and it's quite a prolific infection. It's in a lot of areas and a lot of countries are very, very interested in keeping it out of their countries. So mosquitoes, the Anopheles, and if you're interested, it's only the females, will bite a human and they'll inject basically a dormant or a very immature version of the plasmodiums into the host. From there, it will migrate to what's known as the hepatic stage, where it will mature to a point. Now, this maturity or dormancy ranges depending on the type of plasmodium. Now, there's 6 types of plasmodiums out there, and they vary in lengths of dormancy or maturity. But once they do mature, they will migrate from the hepatic phase and they'll move into what's known as the erythrocytic phase. And this is when the person starts showing symptoms. And this erythrocytic plasmodium version is where they'll start to breed as well, and they'll produce gametes. And they'll produce gametes inside the red blood cells. And the actual presence of the plasmodiums will cause the red blood cells to rupture, which will release these male and female gametes. Now, if another mosquito was to come along and bite you, then they'll pick up these gametes and then they'll infect those gametes into someone else and continue the life cycle. So it's unique in the fact that it needs a mosquito in order to give us the infection. We need to mature the plasmodium to the point of having symptoms, and then the only way to pass it on is through the mosquito itself. Now, as far as the prophylactic side goes, doxycycline keeps the plasmodium life cycle in the hepatic stage. So it locks it into the liver and doesn't allow it to mature to the erythrocytic phase, which allows it to be killed. So you generally start doxycycline 2 days before going to an area where malaria is present. You'll take 1 tablet, 100 milligrams, the entire time that you're there, and then you continue to take it for around 2 to 4 weeks, depending on the regime, after. Now, doxycycline itself can kill certain types of plasmodium, but it's often taken with another drug, like your primaquine, that will kill the plasmodium in the hepatic stage. So it can be quite rough. Now, the success rate of doxycycline on malaria prophylaxis has a lot to do with the individuals taking it. So defense personnel that are on a strict regime, as in they have a doxycycline parade, they're told when to take it, they take it at the same time, same conditions every day, they often have 98 to 100% success malarial prophylaxis compared to others that take it whilst on holidays. They forget a day, have pretty poor adherence. Those success rates have dropped down to 80% in studies. So if you're passing information on to commanders, it's a good idea to micromanage the administration of doxycycline as a malarial prophylaxis. Okay, moving on to a closer look on doxycycline itself, we'll have a look at the pharmacokinetics. So it's an oral tablet that is almost completely absorbed in the small intestine. So it's quite resilient through the gut, and then it will be completely absorbed, no breakdown at all in the small intestine. It peaks its plasma concentration around the 2-hour mark, and it distributes itself to pretty much all tissue and fluids. But its actions seem to only work on those prokaryotic cells that are susceptible. It's protein bound, about 75 to 93%, which means it has a very, very good half-life of around 18 to 22 hours. It's not really effective for 18 to 22 hours, but subsequent doses can keep a pretty good serum level up. Of note, it is at very high concentration in breast milk, so it is not recommended during pregnancy. Metabolism is pretty much negligible. Now, what that means is, it doesn't mean that we don't care about it. It just means that it's not actually broken down that much, and its metabolism doesn't actually affect its bioavailability or the way that it works. So it gets denoted as negligible. Excretion is via the gallbladder and the blood itself, so a little bit in urine, but mostly in feces itself. When we look at the pharmacodynamics for doxycycline, for its use in antibiotics, it works around the ribosome of the actual bacterial cell. Okay? It also has anti-parasitic actions, and it's also been thought to have, it does have in some cases, anti-helminth as well, which is your worms. So what it does is, if you imagine and picture back to how proteins are made, how protein structures that form pretty much every aspect of the living organism is made, it's done by transferring messenger RNA through a decoding sequence in the ribosome, which have coupling codons, which have attached amino acids to the chain in order to build this polypeptide. Now, if you want further information and a deeper look into protein synthesis, then you can go back and have a look at the lesson done on protein synthesis itself. But simply speaking, is when the messenger RNA comes along to be decoded in order to produce a new protein structure, doxycycline and other tetracyclines will actually find a particular codon on that messenger RNA, and they'll bind to it. And by binding to it, they do not allow the subsequent trinucleic pair with its attached amino acid to bind to it, so it cannot complete a sequence or it cannot start a sequence depending on where it is, meaning the protein chain won't actually be produced. In the absence of protein chains, the bacterial cell can no longer sustain itself, can't go through replication, so it sits and basically gets killed by the immune system. Now, doxycycline has a huge list of problems associated with it because it's taken so frequently and for so long. But the main ones you'll get is it's quite rough on your GIT, so you can get quite sick on doxycycline. It is known to cause vaginal candidus, which means if there's any ladies that are taking doxycycline and they're prevalent to candidi, then they're actually recommended to take things in preparation for the candidus to occur. It also has a relatively unique adverse effects of photosynthesis, so it causes this red rash associated with the sun. So it sort of makes you more susceptible to sunburn, but it gives you more of a sunburn-like appearance because of the sun. Now, your general sun protection works for this as well. So if you keep covered up, keep wearing sunscreen, because the recommendations are to avoid sunlight. Now, obviously, if you're taking it on deployments for malarial prophylaxis or you have an infection and they say to avoid sunlight, well, good luck. Now, as far as contraindications go, as mentioned, it is pregnancy and breastfeeding is definitely one. Children under the age of 12, in a lot of cases, is contraindicated because it stains their teeth. Now, it doesn't just make their teeth look a little bit yellow, but it actually weakens the enamel as well. Now, anyone that uses penicillins at the same time, it's contraindicated when using doxycycline. So just be aware of that, especially if they're on the malarial prophylaxis. It's not as big of a deal, but it definitely can cause the penicillins to basically lose their effects. Okay, you'll notice at the start that all the drugs that we give it with, there wasn't a single penicillin to be seen. And then we have the good old sensitivities. As far as interactions go, it's a little bit sensitive, realistically, with a lot of things that people take, generally speaking. So, if the person is on an antacid, then it interacts with doxycycline. It lessens the effects of doxycycline. So, if someone has GI upset and they think it's reflux, so they take an antacid and then they keep taking doxycycline, it can lessen the effects in both the treatment regime and the malarial prophylaxis state. Same too with iron supplements. So, if people are taking these things regularly and they're on doxycycline, they need to be educated to stop, find an alternative, because it does really degrade the effects of your doxycycline. Okay, we'll finish with some clinical take-homes. The best way to take doxycycline is the same time every day, regardless if it's a short regime or for malarial prophylaxis. Same time every day with food and fluids, but not with dairy. Dairy seems to have the same effects as your antacids and your iron supplements, and it lessens the effects. So don't have a big glass of milk when taking doxycycline, but do eat something, then take doxycycline, and then follow up with food. It's like halfway through eating is the best time to do it. Now, it says that you need to remain upright for at least 30 minutes post. The reason for that is doxycycline has a horrible habit of binding to the esophagus, not like binding like a receptor site, but just getting stuck in the esophagus and then causing esophagitis itself, and the bioavailability lessens. So if you have it with food, you stay upright, it's more likely to travel down through the digestive system to be absorbed in the small intestine. Now, direct sunlight, as mentioned, is a concern, difficult to avoid, so protect yourself and encourage others to protect themselves as well. The last thing we'll discuss is something you may hear a lot, is doxy dreams, or bad dreams associated with doxycycline. Now, for many, many years, people have been saying it, so there's a lot of anecdotal evidence around bad dreams, but there's started to get some evidence online. They have these databases where people can put their adverse effects in order to build a pool. Okay, beforehand, we didn't really have that. It was based on studies and that sort of thing, but so now we're starting to get more data. So the data's in that 0.21% of people who take doxycycline can experience bad dreams. Okay, now these are mostly males between 30 and 39 that have been on doxycycline for more than a month. So, whilst the data is not 100% clear, you could theorise that these people are potentially defence personnel or people taking it for malarial prophylaxis, and the variables of being in a new environment, new experiences, and under a significant amount of stress could also be contributing to the bad dreams. So if you hear it, there's nothing you can do about it, but you don't have to believe it wholeheartedly, because there hasn't actually been any big studies that remove the variables of environments to get these bad dreams. Okay, that is it for doxycycline. It's a very popular drug in our world. I hope you got something out of it, found it interesting. Until next time, take care.